This is The Wheel of
Content.
the series where I take community suggestions, anything from games to challenges to things to react to, etc. We put them on a wheel and we spin them. And of course, if you want to leave suggestions for the Wheel of Content, be sure to join the Discord with the link in the description. On today's Wheel of Content, we have Abiotic Factor, Second Stellar from the previous wheel, and reviewing a movie called Project Hail Mary. And I think that's enough marrying our hails. Let's spin this wheel. Alright, it looks like I'm gonna be watching Project Hail Mary and reviewing it for all of you. And just to show you that I didn't cheat or rig the wheel, look, here we go. Look, there are the 3 items on the wheel, only items on there, and then look, just one singular result. There you go. Project Hail Mary is a 2026 sci-fi thriller starring Ryan Gosling and a rock. It's based on a novel by the same name, and it no doubt takes inspiration from other sci-fi stories such as Interstellar or The Martian. It came out back in March and went completely under my radar, but it's about time we talk about it. And you know, kind of have to, since the wheel decided that's what I'm going to talk about today. And of course, spoilers be warned, if you have any plans of watching Project Hail Mary or want to, don't watch this video. Put it in your watch later and come back after you've seen the movie. I haven't watched too many films with Ryan Gosling. Like, I haven't seen too many films with him, just gonna be straight honest. So I didn't really know what to expect from him as an actor, but I quite enjoyed his performance. The premise of the movie is quite simple. The sun is basically going out. There's these strange dark spots on it that no one really knows, no one in the public anyway really knows what they are, but they're actually an alien life form called astrophage, or at least that's what humans call them anyway. And that translates to Star Eater. So the sun is being eaten for some alien just parasite's lunch, basically. And the tone at the very start of the movie is very, very depressing and bleak. If a solution isn't found within the next, 50-ish years, then all life on Earth will basically go extinct. Ryan Gosling plays a character named Ryland Grace, but I'm probably just gonna call him Ryan Gosling, to be honest. He's a teacher who has a much higher education, and as things are getting bleak, he is eventually brought on by all the governments of the world to help solve this crisis. And here's where my first problem with the movie begins. The tone for the first 20-ish minutes is very bleak and things seem like they're very bad. And generally things just seem like they're not gonna really be too great, and the odds of, humanity rising to this challenge and actually making it out on the other side seem almost zero. But of course, if they fail, there wouldn't be a movie, so. But my issues kind of start as soon as Ryan Gosling starts working on the astrophage and figuring out what they're weak to, figuring out how they reproduce, and all this other crazy stuff. The tone goes from bleak and kind of dreary to kind of lighthearted and kind of happy-go-lucky all of a sudden. Like, Ryan Gosling meets this guy named, what's his name? Carl, that's his name. And he's like his personal security overseer guy, just guy who's managing his station that he's working on. And they don't know each other at all. And in the first 10 minutes of their screen time together, in the first 5, it's seems like a serious relationship. And then in the next 5, all of a sudden they're like best bros or something. And there's no development there. So it's just kind of when did these two get so close and so bro-like basically? I mean, I guess if the world's ending, it's important to just sort of be as happy as you can. I know that's what I would do, but I don't know. It feels a bit like I got set up for a pretty somber story and then got suddenly jetted into a pretty nonchalant, chill story, I guess. Anyways, they figure out how astrophage reproduces and all that, and Ryan Gosling continues to work for the government and all these things. And then all of a sudden, disaster strikes. A team was selected to go on the Hail Mary, which was meant to go out into space and figure out what kills astrophage, basically find an ideal genetic predator. But the governments are using astrophage to also power the Hail Mary, since it can achieve basically near light speed capability. But then it blows up, some of it blows up, and most of the team is killed who are gonna go out into space, and there's no geneticists or researchers left who know as much about astrophage as Ryan Gosling, so he has to be the one to go. He doesn't want to, he doesn't have the heart for it, he says he doesn't have the heart for it, but they force him to because there's no other option. And this is where we get to the movie's actual opening. The actual opening of the movie is Ryan Gosling waking up on the Hail Mary, not knowing where he is, who he is, why he knows what he knows, and figuring out that oh, I'm really far away from home, and home is dying. That's how the movie actually opens, which is what I'm talking about when I say the movie feels set up for a very somber and dreary type of story. But I will say the slow process of Ryan Gosling remembering who he is and like getting over that like cryo amnesia, I guess we can call it, very well executed, and I like that it takes a while for him to fully remember. Because I feel like a lot of amnesia stories, like in a lot of movies and TV shows and stuff like that, I feel like a lot of amnesia stories are too fast. I feel like a lot of characters who end up with amnesia for whatever reason remember their stuff too fast because the writers need them to, because they only have so much screen time to work with. But Project Hail Mary is a 2.5-hour movie, so they have the time to fully flesh out those sorts of plot lines. So I very much like that the amnesia aspect of Ryan Gosling's character is, you know, it takes its time and does the proper build up for him fully remembering everything. And now let us move forward in the plot. As I said, this movie features Ryan Gosling and a rock. Let's talk about that rock. As the Project Hail Mary approaches its destination, I forget the exact place it was going to, but it was going somewhere where the astrophage were present, but the star nearby wasn't dying. He shows up, and then, you know, things are just kind of like, okay, well, what now? And then moments after he shows up, mere moments after he shows up, another spacecraft shows up. It looks way different than the Hail Mary and is clearly of alien origin because there's no way humans built it. Now, obviously, it's a movie, okay, so you gotta suspend your disbelief a little bit. And it's like, obviously, if this was actually happening, the odds of these two spacecraft arriving at basically the same time wouldn't happen. But I think they could have had the Hail Mary linger in this place for just a little bit longer before the other spacecraft showed up. But aside from that, the next major sequence of events in the movie are very, very good, if you ask me. Ryan Gosling encounters an alien. And, you know, first things first, when it comes to alien contact, gotta figure out how to communicate. And it takes quite a while for Ryan Gosling and the alien to figure out how to communicate with each other. I'm sure if aliens exist or other intelligent life exists out there, it'll take us quite a long time to figure out how to communicate and how to translate our languages and stuff like that. I will also say the alien spacecraft looks very, very cool. It's all gold and shiny and kind of like spiky. Reminds me a lot of the general aesthetic of the Foundation series. Reminds me a lot of all the Imperial stuff and all the stuff on Trantor. Very nice stuff. Very excellent modeling. The modeling and general visuals of the movie are incredible, and we'll get to some more of it later. After a while, and after flinging a couple of like communication pod things, you know, just objects they were using to communicate with each other, eventually the other ship communicates that like, hey, we should try and talk somewhat face to face. So eventually the gold alien ship connects to the Hail Mary, and then, you know, Ryan Gosling goes through the tunnel, and it's like all low gravity and kind of hard to move around and all this. And then the alien on the other side is kind of like hesitant and like, you know, being like, is this really the best idea? But then eventually they come to the conclusion of, okay, this is ridiculous. And they disconnect their ships, and then they both spin right round, baby, right round to create artificial gravity, and then connect so they can talk a little bit more easily. And this is where we're introduced to Rocky, a little rock feller from a system called Eridanus, who was also being plagued by the astrophage. His crew is also completely dead because his species somehow didn't know about the existence of radiation. How do you build a spacecraft of Rocky's magnitude and not know about radiation? How? And it's quite entertaining how Rocky uses these little puppet shows to try and communicate with Ryan Gosling because he can't really think of any other ideas, so he puts on these little puppet shows with little models of things to try and communicate what he means. Not only does it like actually make sense, like I'm sure that's something that would be tried upon first alien contact, but it's also just kind of adorable. But eventually Ryan Gosling is like, wait a minute, math is the universal language. If we can translate numbers, we can no doubt translate letters and then, you know, subsequently words. At first he tries to use a measuring tape to try and translate about math, but then it's like, okay, this is not working because Rocky gets himself tied up in it like it's a bunch of string. So they use clocks instead to talk about numbers and try and communicate about that. And eventually they get to a point where they're able to communicate. Ryan Gosling takes the noises Rocky makes when, you know, they're both agreeing like, this is the noise I'm making about this thing, and then he adds in a thing to like a text-to-speech type thing, being like, this is the word for this whenever he makes this noise. And then after a lot of, you know, translation, they have a dictionary that they can share, and they're able to communicate. That whole sequence was very, very well executed. Also quite a bit humorous at times. And while there's plenty of jokes in this movie, there's also a lot of tender moments, like sometime after they really figured out how to communicate, Rocky expressed how he was happy that he wasn't alone out here. And yeah, I think anybody would feel that way in that situation. Even if you didn't meet, even if you're not talking to another member of your own species, the fact that you've met someone else who shares your plight and shares your peril and is looking for the same thing you're looking for, just meeting an unlikely ally like that would certainly make anybody feel better, especially in the dead void vacuum of space. But all hell breaks loose when Rocky is invited onto the Hail Mary. For safety and, general just containment, Rocky stays fully physically separated from Ryan Gosling using these just glass tunnel things that can kind of be morphed and reshaped to create an environment that they can both share but not breathe the same air, basically. I'm not gonna try to explain Rocky's technology because it's just sci-fi tech. There's no need to try and explain it, or explain why it works, more rather. It just works, as a wise man once said. And Rocky is quite the meme. There are these hilarious moments and sequences where Ryan Gosling is attempting to record some video diaries for himself, and apparently Rocky and his species have incredibly good hearing, and they can basically hear through walls. So anytime, Ryan Gosling's trying to have a minute to himself, he just can't, because Rocky is just like, who are you talking to? What do you mean? And he's just putting himself in the conversation because he doesn't understand why Ryan Gosling is saying all these things. It's very funny. There's even compilations of Rocky being Rocky on YouTube. And, obviously watch the movie first, but those are quite fun. I've watched quite a few of those. But the two work really hard together to figure out, why the heck isn't the astrophage eating the star, even though, it's coming right from it. That must mean a planet nearby or something nearby is preventing them from doing so or killing them. Since the Hail Mary is a more agile vessel and a little bit more well-equipped, ironically, they both board the Hail Mary and they leave Rocky's ship behind temporarily to get closer to investigate things. The astrophage travel on, infrared light, I think it's infrared light they travel on, so they can just kind of zip everywhere and just go wherever they want. And they want to collect some of the astrophage that's moving from one of its transport lines, from a planet to a star, and they have to come up with a way to collect some without getting too close to the planet because the gravity would rip their ship apart. So Rocky comes up with a brilliant solution. He's just what if we just make a really long chain and then just go fishing, basically. I think I have the perfect meme in mind that can go with a lot of scenes. The ideas are just comical. Now, Ryan Gosling is the one who has to go outside to use the fishing mechanism to harvest some of the astrophage. And, obviously, Rocky can't do it. He's too small. So he goes outside and turns on this, infrared thing that lets him see an infrared light on his visor and stuff. And it's easily one of the most stunning shots in the movie. And Ryan Gosling is having a moment, and it's just incredibly amazing and beautiful. And then cut back to Rocky POV, and he's just kind of out there in space, just kind of looking like he's just going mad, basically. What are you doing? Ryan Gosling literally says, I'm having a moment. And then after the whole fishing scene is done, I don't know why I'm calling it a fishing scene. That's what I'm calling it now. It's the fishing scene. After that's done, Ryan Gosling is sitting looking down at the planet that, that they're investigating. And he asked Rocky what his lover's name was. And henceforth, they named the planet Adrian. And that was a really tender, nice moment in the movie. Now, it's been a little bit since I've watched the movie, so you'll have to excuse me for missing or forgetting a couple of details. But after a series of investigations with the astrophage they got during the fishing scene, they realized that there is something down on Adrian that is eating and killing the astrophage. So the only way to figure out what it is, how to make more of it, is to get some samples. But in order to do that, they're gonna have to get close to the planet, but they can't get too close or else, their ship will get torn apart by gravity. The whole sequence of them getting close to Adrian and, using the same fishing mechanism to try and get some of this predator that's in the atmosphere, this astrophage predator, the whole sequence is really, really good. It's extremely intense. Maybe it drones on for a minute or two more than it has to, but it's still a very intense and good scene. And then after the fact, after it's all over and after gravity is done almost killing them, it gets very sad after that. Back in the first act of the movie, Rocky didn't understand the concept of sleeping. And when Ryan Gosling was taking a nap, he thought that he was dead. But after that whole issue with gravity where the Hail Mary nearly gets torn apart, Rocky gets severely injured. He's much smaller and much more delicate, ironically, than Ryan Gosling and humans are. And he tells Ryan Gosling that he's just gonna, take a nap for a little bit. He's not feeling too great. He's gonna take a nap. And Ryan Gosling is like, all right, but you gotta wake up. You gotta promise me. But then he just falls asleep, and it's really sad. I was like, no, they did not kill him. No way. It was very sad because for the next, 20-ish minutes, 30 even of the movie, Ryan Gosling is just aboard the Hail Mary figuring out how this amoeba that they captured kills the astrophage and figuring out how to make more of it. All the while, Rocky is just assumed to just be a corpse just sitting in the ship, just all sad. Like, it's really depressing. It really makes you feel for these characters in this sequence. Like, throughout the whole movie, their entire dynamic has just been building up, and the chemistry is really good. And then one of them is just presumed dead, and it's like, god damn it. On first watch, I legitimately thought that, oh no, he's dead. He's not waking up. And I think the movie and story could have worked if that happened. I think if Rocky died then and there, it still could have made for a fantastic story. The ending would obviously be different, but I still think it would have made for a very good story. Not that I think the way the story ends is bad or anything. Turns out he just needed a really long nap. And eventually he wakes up and Ryan Gosling is like, yes. And he hugs the chamber around Rocky. It's very sweet, very tender, very good. Because they're both like, yes, we're both alive. We both know how to save our species. And we did it, basically. It's that moment of triumph. So they go their separate ways. It's really sad and disheartening, but they're both very, very glad they met each other. And they say a tender goodbye. And then they just go their separate ways. And it's you think okay, well, that's that, right? No. Turns out the amoeba that they found on Adrian is really, really aggressive. Somehow it escaped containment and ate most of the astrophage that was being used for fuel aboard the Hail Mary. And no doubt the same thing happened on Rocky's ship. So Ryan Gosling does the math and he's like, okay, don't have enough fuel to save Rocky and go to Earth. So I'm gonna send the amoeba back to Earth on a drone, and then I'm gonna go save Rocky because he's my friend. And then one of the scientists / government ringleaders we saw in the first act of the movie finds the drones that crashed onto Earth, and it's like, yes, good job. And they found his video entries and all this stuff, and they see that oh my god, there's alien life forms and all this, and it's just cool, Earth is safe now. And meanwhile, out in space, Ryan Gosling, it's not, none of this was shown on screen. It's kind of just one of those cuts where it's just okay, this is what happens. Here's the ending. I'm not usually a big fan of those, but I can let them slide when there's not too much cut. At least we see the two ships link back up again. But Rocky is still safe, everything's all good, but there's not enough fuel to get all the way back to Earth since they're already so close to Arid. So Ryan Gosling is brought to Arid and a little biodome is built for him where he can stay safe while a ship is made to get him home. And a ship is ready to take him back home after, a period of time, but he decides to stay for a little bit longer because he really likes it there, and he also decides to teach some of the Iridians, and it's a very tender ending. And that is the majority of the plot. There's some things I skipped over and glanced over just because, like I said, it's a long movie, and I've already been recording for half an hour, and I try to keep these recordings under an hour. But now I want to talk about the film in a little bit more detail, and some of my criticisms, some of the things I liked, and stuff like that. I think the tone of the movie definitely didn't need to be as lighthearted and upbeat as much as it did. I get that it's not meant to be an uber serious dreadful story, kind of like Interstellar and The Martian were at times, but I still think there was a little bit more room for that kind of dread, because it's the mysteries and unknown of space. It's space. Crap is dreadful out there. That's not to say the moments that were dreadful and somber and downtrodden weren't extremely impactful. In fact, there's a case to be made that because everything else is so lighthearted and upbeat at times, the dreadful moments are even more impactful. But I don't know. I'm just a guy who likes dreadful and somber stories, I guess. I think the reveal that Ryan Gosling didn't go to space willingly for this mission was really, really good. I think it makes perfect sense. I feel like a lot of movies who have these sorts of heroes who are don't necessarily plan on being the one to save the day, but then something bad happens to someone else or whatever, and then they have to be the person. They usually step up and rise to the challenge willingly. I like the very human aspect of the fact that he didn't want to go, and he's like, look, I'm sorry, I can't be the one to do this. I don't have the heart for it. Like, that is very human. That is a very human reaction. Whether we want to accept it or not, we are very selfish creatures. That's just how we are. We want to protect ourselves and that which we care for above all else. And I feel like a majority of people would choose to just live the best life they can with the time they have left, as opposed to going on this crazy mission that is a long shot, you know, a Hail Mary. So I very much like that he was written to not going willingly on this mission. That made a whole lot of sense. The visual style of the Iridians' technology and just them in general, just these little funny rock people, I think it all looked quite good, like the CG, like having a movie where the main character is, you know, a human actor and then the secondary character is a CGI character. It can be pretty tricky. Not all of it is perfect, but for the most part, it does look very good. I mean, how much budget did this movie have? I should have looked this up. Okay, it had quite the budget. That explains why the CG is actually quite good. I think the movie also did a very good job at bringing many plot threads and bringing many small interactions between our characters full circle. Like, for example, the whole napping thing where Rocky thought Ryan Gosling was dead, and then it's the other way around when Rocky's sleeping, since, you know, he doesn't sleep. I think the movie did a very good job at bringing many of those threads very full circle. Another example of that is that in the very beginning of the movie, or not in the beginning of the movie, but in the first act, Ryan Gosling remembers himself as a teacher and he asks his class, you know, what's the speed of light? And then at the very end of the movie, when he's teaching the Iridians, he asks the same question. Clearly there was, you know, enough emphasis or enough care to bring many things full circle and do many good callbacks to things that happened earlier in the movie. And I feel like callbacks and generally bringing things full circle in that sort of sense is unironically kind of easier when you have a longer movie. Because think about it, right? You have all this runtime, like 2.5 hours, like even in the case of like 3 hours or more, you have more time to set things up and sort of progress them and then bring them around in a clever way. Like, you have more time to make the impact of it being brought full circle just more impactful. So I was quite pleased when it was able to do so in quite an impactful, clever, and entertaining way. You don't necessarily need to have callbacks or, like, you know, bring moments full circle with callbacks in that sense. Like, you can still have a movie come full circle, obviously. But you don't necessarily need to do it with callbacks. And I feel like in some cases, some shows and movies use too many callbacks and have an over-reliance on callbacks as like a way to bring things full circle. Take Disney, for example, and Star Wars. They love using callbacks to the original trilogy to, you know, compensate for their lack of writing ability. But in the case of Project Hail Mary, there aren't an overwhelming number of callbacks where it's like, oh yeah, remember this? This is a thing that happened. You know, that didn't happen too many times to the point where it was like, okay, we get it now. I feel like after the second or third one, it kind of gets a bit repetitive and a bit like, okay, you know, we get it. But there were only like 2-ish callbacks, like 2 or 3, I think, in Project Hail Mary, and they were spread out quite nicely as well. The conclusion also made a lot of sense. It made quite a bit of sense that Ryan Gosling stayed on Eridanus, or decided to stay there for a little bit longer, because as one of the government people pointed out earlier in the movie, he doesn't really have anything on Earth. You know, he doesn't have a family or someone he loves or any of that anymore. So it kind of makes sense that he would stay with the Iridians since, you know, he met Rocky, who is a really good friend. And he just seems to be a little bit more content and happy there. Earth can be a sucky place, you know? Besides, who wouldn't want to, like, live with an alien civilization for a while as a welcomed guest? Like, you're making history out there. Not only that, but it's just, like, such a fascinating opportunity. Who wouldn't turn that down? I think the music was also quite good. I think overall the soundtrack for Hail Mary worked out quite well. It was definitely an enhancement. It wasn't, like, you know, it wasn't, like, overwhelmingly memorable like Interstellar was. But, you know, it enhanced each scene in the way it intended to. And I like that there was a relatively small cast of characters. I think there's many, many benefits to having less characters than more. You get to put more focus on those characters and give them more plots and more, like, fleshed out personalities and stuff like that when you have a smaller cast. I wish I knew it was based on a book, because then I would have, like, probably not read the whole thing, but at least done some reading of the book so I could make some comparisons between the movie and the book. So I'm not going to give any opinions or statements on the book because I simply don't have the perspective. but I bet at least one of you out there does. So for anybody who has read the book, and for anybody who is knowledgeable of it at least, feel free to leave your thoughts about how you feel about the movie compared to the book in the comments. So to try and sum up my thoughts, Project Hail Mary is quite a good movie. I think overall it does what it set out to achieve. The visual effects were very, very pleasing to look at. I think Ryan Gosling's acting in the whole movie was quite entertaining. The highlights of the film were no doubt some of the earlier acts where, you know, Ryan Gosling and Rocky were trying to figure out how to communicate and sort of figuring out their sort of just general partnership and friendship together. I think that was definitely the setup was definitely the highlight. I think the ending could have gone in a multitude of directions. I don't think the direction it chose was bad or anything, but I think it could have done something a tiny bit more interesting and a little less cliche. But I won't complain about a little bit of cliche because that's just the world of film. So if I were to give Project Hail Mary a rating, I would give it like a 7.35 out of 10. I think that feels pretty good. Am I glad I watched it? Absolutely. Will I rewatch it? Yeah, probably. But I think I would probably sooner rather rewatch The Martian or Interstellar, probably. But that's more so because of my own personal biases. Don't let that discourage you if you really like this movie compared to those two or other sci-fi films in this general genre. But please feel free to tell me what you think about this movie, and if you agree or disagree with any of my opinions and thoughts about this movie, down in the comments. This is the first time I've done a movie review slash synopsis for the Wheel of Content, so also let me know if you enjoyed that. Usually with things like this, I try to script them and, you know, or at least write down a bunch of notes for myself, but I just did this one totally impromptu. So feel free to leave suggestions for more movies for me to check out, and just more suggestions for the Wheel in general in the Discord server, also linked in the description. And if you enjoyed this video, of course, and you enjoy what I do around here, and you want to stick around for some more of this, be sure to hit the like and sub button. I'd really appreciate that. That'd be very cool of you. And if you really like the way I do things around here, and you want to show a tiny bit of extra support, consider becoming a channel member or joining the Patreon. You get access to a whole bunch of exclusive rewards like director's cuts and a Discord role and a Discord channel and custom emojis and a whole bunch of other cool stuff. And you also directly support me in the process and help keep this channel running. But that is going to do it for now. Thank you all so much for watching, and yeah, have a good day, everyone.